According to the Banking Ombudsman's annual report, there were more than 5,000 cases opened in 2015, of which nearly 4,900 were closed, which suggests that the Ombud process is working well. Biggest complaint, ATMs. That was about a quarter of the Ombudsman's caseload. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight I'm talking to Advocate Clive Pillay. He's the Ombudsman for banking services. But why are we seeing rising levels of complaints at about 5 of the big banks? Standard Bank ranked top in terms of the number of complaints. We also saw complaints about Nedbank grow by huge 43%, Absa by 24%, FNB by 18%, and Capitec in single digits. But yeah, complaints about banks seem to be on the rise. Is that a fair assessment, Clive?
I think so, yes.
Is it because you're more visible and you've been in place for a long time and people are becoming more aware of you and what you do?
I think so. I think people are more aware of the existence of the office and the work we do. But I also think that SA consumers are becoming more active. There's consumer activism on the rise, which I think is a good thing.
And also, I think we have higher and higher expectations of our banks.
Yes, I think so, and I think those expectations are not misplaced, especially in the light of the Treating Customer Fairly initiatives by the FSB.
Now, the Treating Customer Fairly initiative, it's a UK-originated concept. Financial Services Board has brought it in across banking and insurance and all financial services products, and that has raised the game, I suppose, for banks in particular.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So banks are compelled to be more customer and service orientated.
Now, it's all well and good, but I come into a bank, I enter into an agreement, I have an expectation of that agreement, the bank has a different expectation. Suddenly we're in a grey area of meeting expectations as opposed to what is contractually bound. How many of those sorts of quite difficult quandaries do you face?
Well, we capture those statistics, and presently 49% of the Treating Customer Fairly outcomes relate to the absence of clear information and the absence of an explanation to the prospective or new customer.
Now, absence of information, so something that's not declared on a website or in a conversation with a call centre. Gosh, we love call centres. The call centre agent didn't communicate clearly that it was a monthly interest rate that you had to pay and that it wasn't a once-off payment on your credit card, or that if you withdrew cash on your credit card, you'd immediately pay interest on it, whatever the complaint might be.
Right. Plus, in addition to that, simply the language is, for many people, still at a level.
Because banks speak bank.
Absolutely.
They don't speak a language recognizable to anybody else. Is any one of the banks doing that TCF, the language part of TCF best?
Well, all banks are committed to that, and we've seen that in all the banks in a number of contracts, but it's not as widespread and as prevalent and as pervasive as we would like.
Now, most complaints came through about Standard Bank. Is that reflective of Standard Bank, or is there an anomaly coming in there?
Well, look, please understand that the number of complaints is certainly not indicative of that particular bank's commitment to customer service and the resolution of complaints, simply because banks differ in the total deposits from the public, they differ in the total liability to the public, they differ in product size, mix, variation, and of course they also differ in the number of clients and the kinds of clients that they have. So all of those need to be taken into account.
So we don't want to make excuses for any one of the banks, but Standard Bank does have the highest number of complaints.
Yes, but as I say, with that proviso, that it's not necessarily indicative of bad performance on behalf of the bank.
Now, when we look at Nedbank, for example, in excess of 43% growth in customer complaints. Now, for that, Nedbank may say, well, we're being successful because actually we're growing what was quite a small elite client base into a far broader, more general client base. And maybe we drop the ball from time to time, but it shows we're active. I mean, if I was to be doing PR for Nedbank, which I'm not.
Well, that's precisely the point. You know. With an increase in the number of transactional clients, one would expect a concomitant increase in the number of complaints. And we also find that 49% of our complaints are derived or emanate from banks. So banks themselves are sending more disgruntled clients to us.
No, because the way the process works, I'm a customer with a problem. I go to the teller can't help me. I go to the branch manager can't help me. I then the process is I would then go to the banking group's internal ombud, and if I'm not satisfied with that resolution, they are then obliged to pass it up to you.
Right.
And your ruling is full and final.
All right.
That's how the
That's exactly how it works.
That's how the process works. So we are seeing banks where they're in an uncertain area with their customers, passing that work on to you.
Yeah, and we've seen a steady increase in those numbers of banks passing on customers.
Now, in a world of digital banking, one would think that the number of complaints would drop because you take out the human element, and often mistakes happen when people get involved. Theoretically, if you can automate stuff, there should be fewer mistakes.
Well, I'm not sure it happens that way in practice, because we find mistakes in digital platforms, in a simple one such as an ATM transaction.
But now, 1,500 complaints, 20%, 25% of your complaints were all about ATMs.
Yeah.
People being shortchanged, or what's the issue?
No, look, what happens, first of all, you need to understand that, as you know, banks encourage people not to come into the branch. So more people are using ATMs. So there's an increased usage of ATMs. And then people don't safeguard their PINs and or cards, and they fall victims to scams.
So the 1,500 complaints are largely due to security issues around that.
Well, it's a lapse on the part of the transacting client.
And how many complaints? We saw FNB drawn into a big scandal over the December holidays. We saw the forensic investigator in Cape Town, of course, take up a couple of client issues of people who had their internet banking hacked. Has there been an increase there?
No, we haven't seen that. My understanding is that those accounts or those complaints have been dealt with directly by the bank.
Now, how much of what you're seeing then reflects reality? Because the banks could keep a lot of stuff in-house and sit on it for an awfully long time before passing it through to you.
I can't, unfortunately, answer that question.
Because anecdotally, they're sitting on a bit of a time bomb.
So how many complaints banks resolve in-house and how much money they disburse to disgruntled customers, I don't know. I can only talk of the cases that pass my desk, unfortunately.
But is there, if somebody has a concern, if they think that the bank is not dealing with an issue adequately or quickly enough, can they circumvent the bank process?
No, you've got to give the bank or afford the bank an opportunity of resolving your complaint.
What's a fair opportunity?
20 days.
20 days.
Yep.
And at the end of 20 days, if I'm not satisfied, I can then come up to you. I can bring it to you. It's not only a process via the bank. I can take the complaint to you.
No, of course. And you can come of your own accord.
So we're seeing the number of complaints rise. We're seeing even in the digital space, there are higher numbers of complaints. What after ATMs, what else are people concerned about when it comes to their bank?
Internet banking, and mortgage finance.
No, what are the issues with mortgage finance? Is it disagreement over the monthly payments and when the interest rate is levied?
And interest agreed upon but not implemented, and bond not cancelled, notwithstanding instruction from the client to do so. A whole range of complaints.
But all of this implies that, I mean, some of us are quite slack with our banking. I'm not saying that I am, but you might, for example, in the morning pop into a branch to deposit a check. Did you have one? You then went outside and drew cash from the ATM, and later on that afternoon you transferred some cash using your bank app.
Right.
It's very easy to lose track 12 months later of the process of what you did on that particular day. Record keeping on behalf of a customer who has a complaint is absolutely pivotal in this show.
Absolutely. Indispensable. And regular checking.
And how many people are actually prepared for a rigorous inspection when they bring their problems to you?
If I had to hazard a guess, I would say no.
But that's the point. Do you find lots of spurious complaints coming through to you?
Now look, what has happened of late, we track past 18, 24 months, a number of debt-stressed consumers are complaining. So there's no legitimate complaint against the bank per se, but the complaint is, I need some kind of debt relief or debt accommodation. And that's not really any maladministration on the part of the bank.
And at that point you've got to say no.
Yes, or refer them to a debt counsellor.
Yeah. Now, hypothetically speaking, I mean, I know it doesn't happen often in South Africa, but from time to time, I'm told a bank can fire its customer. Now, you might swear at a bank teller. You might be involved, I don't know, in money laundering, whatever the case might be. But we've seen a couple of cases in recent weeks of a family and companies connected to a family rejected as clients by all of the major banks in South Africa. Unprecedented as far as I can tell. Have you had a call from the Guptas to say to you, Clive, these guys are treating us unfairly, you've got to deal with this procedural issue?
We haven't had a call from the Guptas, but banks are entitled to do that. Obviously, in the cases you mentioned, money laundering, the financing of terrorism, and where there's potential or present reputational damage, they're entitled to close an account.
Have you ever dealt with a customer complaint on that basis, where somebody's had an account closed by the bank?
The only proviso is that we expect the bank to give the customer a reasonable notice period, so that you can make alternative arrangements.
So the branch manager might not like the look of your face,
well, it's not,
because it's almost like having a right of admission sticker above the door when you deal with the bank.
It's not as fickle as that.
Okay.
There has to be a basis in fact and in law for the termination of the association between the bank and the customer. And of course, the well-known case is the Rodenbach case.
Bredenkamp versus Standard Bank, 2009. I've done my research into this one. So what you're telling us, there may be more to this Gupta closing of accounts than meets the eye.
Well, I would imagine so. I would imagine that there's a substantive reason or reasons for closing the account.
Okay, but it wouldn't be necessarily worth the Guptas as well to give you a call and say, could you get our account reinstated?
No, it wouldn't.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Advocate Clive Pillay, the Ombudsman, very naughty, Ombudsman for banking services. Lots of complaints about banks. The banking process is a complicated one. It's a very emotional one. The way it works, you've got a complaint, take it to the branch manager. If the branch manager doesn't help you, go to the internal banking ombud. If they don't help you within a reasonable period of 20 days, Clive Pillay is your guy. Next time on the MoneyMakers, good night.